I remember the moment when I knew I was going divorced with 5 children. We had just come out of church. It was in the early evening, standing in the parking lot. I remember the thought entering into my mind. I knew for sure I was going to be divorced with 5 children. My youngest had just recently been born. I don't think he was more than 2 years old. The journey didn't actually start as soon as that, but the reality of where I was headed, I was right. That's where I was headed. And off we went. So in my mind, I had to prepare. I knew that I needed a place where I could raise 5 children in an environment that was safe for them, an environment that they could learn to swim. That was a big thing for me. I grew up on the beaches of Kennebunk, Maine, and I was taught to swim in pools and at the beach a lot through summer camp and my mom mostly, and dad teaching us. So I knew that in order to do this for the 5, I was going to need to be able to put them in the water. And summer camp was not an option. I mentioned it before, $7 an hour was about what I was making. And it wasn't a full-time job. This job was created from who was then my new insurance man. And I refer to him as Pop. Pop was very significant in my life at that time. He made a difference. He made a job for me when I needed a job. I was carrying frozen food house to house in a sales position. This particular job, it was a good job. I was doing very well, but it would sometimes get me home at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And one particular night, there was a very scary incident where I saw my life flash before my eyes. The group of people that I was talking to it was late, and they were definitely either drunk or high, and they saw me as an object. It was very, very scary. I didn't see myself coming out of it alive. And when I got back into the truck wouldn't start. It was a very scary night, and at that point I knew I needed to not do this job anymore. I needed another job. Well, Pop created that job for me. I became his assistant in his insurance office. And I think it worked out to be about $7 an hour, maybe a little more than that. It wasn't full-time that I recall, but it definitely made a difference. And at that time, the house that we had recently purchased, and that's what I'm going to talk about, was a small 560 square foot. It was a beach house for the previous family, and this particular house did not have insulation. It didn't even have heat. It didn't have central heat. It didn't have central air. It was a window unit air system, and basically you weren't supposed to be there in the winter time, so there wasn't need for heat, and they would just turn the water off. Well, this house was listed for I think $60,000, and I ended up getting it for $45,000. Now at the time, my credit was not good at all. Anybody experienced that in your life? That was one of the things that was not going well in the marriage, and yeah, my credit was shot pretty much. So I didn't have any credit, to say, and buying a house with no credit is not an easy feat. But I had recently taken a real estate course, and I knew that there were owners out there that were willing to finance. So my goal was to find an owner that was willing to finance. My mother and I talked on a regular basis, and during this time, going through a separation and a divorce when you have 5 children. She was my life support. She had agreed that I, with my analysis of either get an apartment and then have to renew the lease, or get a house and the home owner decides to sell the house, and then I've got to go out and find another place to live, and listing as a single parent, little to no income, and 5 children. It's going to be hard to find a place that's going to be willing to take me in. So the decision was made that it was best for me to buy a house. In order to purchase this house, the owner had to agree to seller finance. I had to be able to put a down payment down enough so that the owner would say, yes, I will seller finance. And then I had to get the loan eventually, because the owner's not going to seller finance for 30 years. But it's easier to get a loan if you own the property, which is considered refinancing, than it is to get the loan and you don't own the property. So the owner agreed if I put down a down payment of, I think it was 10%, or he would hold the note for 3 years and I pay him $400 a month. And that was all agreed upon. Now and the family members lived out of state. They didn't want to have to deal with the house anymore. So they agreed to seller finance with me for what they said would be 3 years. Well, when we got to the settlement table, they changed it to 2 years. So I knew I was going to have to refinance this house in 2 years. I was able to find a company. Now, mind you, the interest rate was not attractive. It was 14%. Okay, but the loan was in my name. I remember how proud I was that I had a loan, a mortgage loan, in my name for my house. Now, if you could see the house, it had a lot of holes in it. It didn't have central heat, like I said. That's the next story. We had fleas, bees, mice, and ice. And when the ice came in the way that it did, we had to leave. But we lived in that little 560 square foot house for 5 years before we moved out, and then that's another story. Please subscribe. And maybe even hit like if you like it. Oh, and then maybe tell somebody about it. This is Jackie's Journey with Jackie. Just sharing some of the things that I've been through. Miracles, yes, I think so. Hard times, being able to be undefeated, yes, I think so. Undefeated is like my theme. Dare to do different is my theme. I am living in the Middle East now. My children are grown and they're doing their own things because I dared to do different. And thanks for joining Jackie as she tells her journey. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friend. Bye.